Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. This is going to be amazing. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, resiliency, mindset, and we're also talking about depression. So if you've ever wrestled with depression, this is the show for you. Love you guys. Thank you for being a part of my journey and letting me be a part of yours. This gentleman we're going to speak to has done amazing things in uniform, out of uniform, and I've listened to hundreds of TEDx talks, and his has got to be in the top 3 of all time. So I want to say thank you, Skip. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on and hanging out with us today.
My pleasure, Richard. I'm delighted to be here, brother.
So what is the biggest myth that you've heard about depression?
I think the biggest myth regarding depression is get over it. You're just down. It's not just feeling down. Depression is a disease. It's this deep, dark, palpable cloud that descends upon you. It's a change in the chemicals in your brain. It affects you mentally, emotionally. It affects your body. It affects your thinking, your cognition. It affects you socially. It affects you spiritually. It affects you in every aspect of your being. It's not just feeling down. Everybody might feel down from time to time. Depression isn't just feeling down, and you just don't tell somebody, "Oh, just get over it." That is not depression.
And I love that. I am a suicide survivor, have dealt with anxiety and depression. And, when I always hear that, well, get over it, that's like telling a deaf person to listen harder. It just doesn't work. You know what I mean? So talk to us a little bit. You've done some amazing things in your career, wrestling wise, military, TEDx. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, where you grew up, and how you became the man that you are today.
I'm the third of 8 children born of Hispanic parents of very meager means. I was born in Denver, Colorado, and my father came back a broken man from the Korean War. And he, I'm convinced, had bipolar disorder, PTSD, and he was an alcoholic. And when he drank, he was violent. My oldest sister, Roma, tells us we would run and hide when my dad came home. We didn't know which dad was coming home, the fun, loving, kind dad, or the angry, violent dad. Now, I don't have basically any memories before the age of 7. So my childhood was quite traumatic. We moved frequently, and I was the new kid on the block. I was the smallest kid typically in my class. Was bullied. I was inept at any sport. I was not just socially awkward, but physically awkward. I didn't know how to throw, catch, kick a ball. I tell people I failed at tetherball. But in 8th grade, after my mother had remarried, I discovered wrestling. And wrestling changed the course of my life. Because it was the first time I ever had this sense. I think I can be good at this. I think I can really be good at this. Now, mind you, it took me 2 years to win my first match, but I eventually won many state freestyle tournaments. It was in the regular, what we call schoolboy, or the American style of wrestling. I was a 2-time district champion, state runner-up, honorable mention All-American, placed in 2 national tournaments in freestyle, and I had a passion for the sport. And the interesting thing, even though I'm a small man, a small guy, I wrestled 85 pounds in 8th grade, 95 pounds in 9th grade, 112 pounds through high school, 118 pounds in college, and anywhere from 123 to 127 and a half pounds after college. Bullies left me alone once I started wrestling. I used to think, where are the bullies? Bring on the bullies.
All right, so let me ask you a question. I've had now over 500 interviews with some of the most badass people, whether they're Navy SEALs, whether they're Delta Force, Rangers, and a big majority of them come from a wrestling background. And when I ask them, what made you want to get through selection process, they said a lot of it went back to their wrestling because, when a lot of people don't know that when a child or even a teenager is wrestling, the wrestling season's usually through Thanksgiving, Christmas. So while everybody else is eating good stuff, you're eating plain turkey and sucking on ice chips. So it takes a lot of discipline. And the one thing about wrestling is if you get pinned, it's your fault. There's nobody to blame. There's nobody to, so talk to us about the mindset and the discipline of a wrestler.
I call it you have to have a guts, Guts, guts. And that's this internal sense that no matter what, I'm not going to give up. And the mindset of a wrestler is I'm just going to push hard. That even though everything in my body and mind is saying give up, I'm going to do one extra push up, one more pull up when I'm training, one more wind sprint, and out on the mat when I'm practicing, one more takedown. When you're competing, that no matter how tired, how my lungs are burning, and everything is telling me just quit, that I'm not going to quit. That's the mindset of a wrestler. We train so intensely, and people don't understand that in a match. In high school, it was a six-minute match. In college, a 7-minute match. And people don't realize the intensity that goes into that. People think, oh, why don't they get up and move more until they get out there and try it for a few minutes even and think, oh my gosh, I've seen high school All-Americans go out there and wrestle, and wrestling made them look like wimps because it's such a difficult and intense sport. So it requires such intensity mentally, emotionally, physically, and even spiritually, because you have to throw your being into it. It's face to face, hand to hand, really combat. That you have to put aside your fears of looking foolish, fears of your opponent, fears, what if I'm not adequate? You have to deal with all of that. And now you're out there facing that opponent one-on-one. And when that whistle blows, you better be ready.
And, one thing, I love about wrestling and martial arts is that, now it's a little bit easier because you can watch a lot of tape. You could watch a lot of DVRs, whatever. But back then, when we were coming up, if you're facing somebody, you might never face them before, and you got to be able to switch on. You got to be able to do things on the move to see what they're doing, what their tells are. So did that help you when you got into college to be able to be quick on your feet and be able to think, okay, I need to change this situation because of my background, what I was taught in wrestling?
It teaches you a resilience. It teaches you get knocked on your back, I can come back. It teaches you discipline, determination. One of the things I learned early on is a few things there that wrestling taught me is I wasn't as gifted physically, as strong as other kids, as coordinated, as quick and explosive. So I had to train. I trained like a maniac. I trained all year long. I'd run it throughout the year. I'd lift weights. I'd practice throughout the year. Rope skip hours at a time. I would do these things and train. I didn't know anybody else that trained as hard as I trained. I'd have kids come up to me that were younger and say, I'd like to be as good as you. And I used to think to myself, I didn't tell them this, but I used to think, no, you don't. You're not willing to train as hard as I train. until you're willing to come in that weight room with me after school when everybody else is headed out, until you're willing to, at lunchtime, go out and run 440s with me or sprints with me, unless you're willing to get up early in the morning and run a few miles with me. In the summers, go to summer tournaments and practice with me. There was a summer we didn't have access to a gym. Two buddies of mine, we would go out on the lawn. That's where we practiced before we'd go to tournaments. That's the only way we could practice. But so it teaches you determination. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you that, yeah, you're going to get knocked on your back, but that's all right. You can get up and you get back in the game. There's another match. And yeah, it's humiliating to get beat. Nobody wants to get beat in front of everybody and your other opponents getting their hand raised. You never want that. So wrestling teaches you many things. So as I said, I wasn't as gifted physically, so I had to work very, very, very hard. But what it taught me is that discipline, determination, and persistence can trump natural ability. Guys with natural ability that didn't want to work hard, guess what? I surpassed them. And I saw the same thing in the classroom, kids that were brilliant, but they were lazy. And again, I surpassed them in the classroom because they weren't disciplined. They weren't determined, and they didn't persevere. And so I surpassed them. I saw it on both counts.
And one of my favorite quotes is hard work beats talent that doesn't work hard. And
indeed.
I'm a big sports guy, and there's just certain people that just had that mindset, that Michael Jordan, that Kobe Bryant, they just had the mindset, I'm going to outwork you. You will not outwork me. No matter what it is, you will not outwork me. So now you make it to college, and you decide to join the military?
I went to college on an ROTC scholarship at the University of Notre Dame. However, I left school my 5th semester, so that ended my scholarship. I was out of school for about 3 years, transferred into Oral Roberts University, finished up my undergraduate degree there, met my sweetheart there. We couldn't get married because couldn't support a wife. But then I applied for what we call a HPSP scholarship, Health Profession Scholarship Program, to go to medical school. And once I received that scholarship, I knew, okay, now I could get married because I could support a wife by the meager living stipend they gave with that scholarship. Plus, my wife had a fellowship at that time to the University of Tulsa. And between the two of us, and living in graduate housing, we could make it. And so that's how I went through medical school, was on an Army scholarship, owing the Army 4 years. But I knew going into the Army that I wanted to make it a career.
So now going through officer basic candidate school, I don't know what they call it now. But
OBC, but OBC for officers, it's a gentleman's school. Especially for military medical officers.
So what was the mindset going? Because I'm sure that when you went there, there were some people that did not have that, I call it the dog mentality, that wrestling mentality. So what was it like going there? And because I'm sure you were high speed, no drag. What was it like? What was it like being around some guys that were just mailing it in,
Well, a couple things. One, of course, I excelled physically because I'm a tough guy in terms of physically. I can push. Yeah, I can push hard, and I did push hard physically. The other is I was interested in learning, so we'd have all our manuals and different things, and I wanted to learn, and so I'd ask questions, and the instructor, are there any questions? And I'm raising questions because I had legitimate questions. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand. And I could see my classmates, they wanted to get out of there, and they're just kind of rolling their eyes. I could just see them. They're just rolling their eyes. And it's funny because at the end of the course, they informally awarded me with the classmate who was most likely to extend class by asking questions.
You were that guy. You
Yeah, I
were
was that guy because I wanted to learn. I had legitimate questions, and there, like I said, I look back and I can just see some kind of looking at me, and they're rolling their eyes, or the instructors say, "Are there any questions?" And they would just all kind of turn their heads to look at because I wanted to learn. I legitimately wanted to learn. That was OBC. Yes.
Now, did you get deployed? Were you deployed anywhere?
Oh my goodness, yes. I spent 37 months deployed. The first time, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm with the 47th Field Hospital. And we were set up, we were sent to Bahrain. We were the first large medical unit in the theater. And at the time, as you recall, perhaps in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, I don't know if that was before your time in the military, Richard, or not, but the things were very tenuous at that time. We knew Saddam had chemical weapons. We knew he had already used chemical weapons, and we were within range of Scud missiles where we were at from his deployment of Scuds. And the alarms would go off, and we'd be donning our masks and our protective gear. And of course, in that kind of temperature, within minutes, you're just pouring with sweat, the inserts, of course, because I wore glasses, are fogging up. It was just miserable. But we were set up and we're ready. And before they began the massive bombing during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, there was the predictions if we had a massive ground assault, there were going to be tens and tens of thousands of casualties if we had mounted a large ground assault to free Kuwait. But of course, because of the massive air assault, we didn't see those kind of casualties, thank the Lord.
Okay, so before we go on to the next thing, I want to thank our sponsors. As you guys know, I love my coffee. We were talking before we got on. You're drinking your coffee. One of my favorite coffees is Soldier Girl Coffee. She's a female veteran dealing with PTSD and thriving with PTSD. And she's also a veteran-owned company that hires nothing but veterans. So if you guys love veterans, if you love coffee, if you like coffee with CBD, definitely check out her vanilla roast. It's amazing. And then I want to thank our other sponsor, which is me. Came out with our brand new clothes, with the brand new t-shirts, hats. And if you guys want to support us, wear our stuff. And 22% of everything we make goes to help veterans that are struggling with homelessness and PTSD. So thank you guys for your continued support. I love you guys. So now back to in being an officer in the military, did you have to deal with a lot of people that got sick physically and then or got hurt and then they had to rebound mentally?
Well, it was interesting. Of course, you had a large array in the military, as you know, a very robust medical system. So certainly individuals got hurt physically. I remember we dealt with a young soldier. I shouldn't say I dealt directly, but our surgeons did during that first deployment with the 47th, who had received a Dear John letter. This young guy, about 19 years old. As I recall, he had received a Dear John letter from a girlfriend and shot himself in the head. So he came in and they were desperately trying to save this young soldier's life. They brought him in, they were pouring IV fluids into him, took him to the CT scanner and then to the OR, and he expired as they were attempting to take care of him. The surgeons were attempting to care for him in the operating room. So yes, trauma there and other trauma certainly that we took care of. So I had deployments, as I said, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, to Haiti, there in a peacekeeping type of mission there to Haiti in 98. Unfortunately, right on the heels after my stepfather died in late 97. And then OIF 1, Operation Iraqi Freedom 1, 2003, 2004. I was with the 21st Combat Support Hospital up in Mosul in support of that northern sector where the 101st Airborne Division was. Air assault. And then last time I was deployed was in 2010, 2011, back to Iraq in a support and training mission there. So all that time I was deployed, but certainly you see trauma. There was trauma when I was at my first duty station in Fort Sill. I remember there was it's home of the artillery there at Fort Sill and artillery training. And there was an inerrant shell that landed in a training platoon. And so it killed some individuals there. It blew, shrapnel wounds and so forth. It blew the leg off of the drill sergeant, and they brought those casualties into the hospital. So I remember one of my fellow colleagues and I, we were up all night treating these casualties. And two soldiers in particular, a young soldier that was a trainee and this drill sergeant, we spent all night after they came, stabilizing them. They went to the OR and they were treated, and then keeping them stable the rest of the night. And in the next few days before they went down to Brooke Army Medical Center. So I remember that distinctly, that training accident. There was another training accident where some vehicles rolled over and into one of the creeks, and there were drownings, and we had to deal with that. So, even training in the Army, as you know, is a dangerous business. So that was just at my first duty station.
I love my first responders, and you were a first responder and a veteran. And like I tell everybody, first responders and veterans, we see things that should never be seen. Mm-hmm. We see the unseeable. And once you see something, you can't unsee it. Mm-hmm. And the average, and a lot of people don't realize this, but the average male in the United States lives to 78 years old. That's the average male. Mm-hmm. But the average first responder's lifespan is 58 years. So that's a 20-year difference. So what is the difference? Why are first responders, veterans, why are we so likely to die 20 years earlier than everybody else?
Well, I think it's on different counts. One, higher rates of suicide certainly drops that rate, if you will, that average rate of longevity. But the other is the rates of chronic illnesses. And when you have chronic illnesses, that chronic inflammation, that it breeds in your body and that ages you prematurely. We are finding more and more that heart disease, diabetes, and other diseases are related to inflammation. And so when you are under chronic stress, this causes chronic inflammation. And with that, it is a milieu, it is a breeding pot for chronic disease. And so I think that's another aspect of that, is that breeding pot. And then if you look at it, I saw this phenomena in soldiers that I took care of. I saw soldiers retiring from the Army, and in many cases, several years my junior, because I was a physician and all the years of training it took where I was in my career. Some of these had come in as young, right out of high school. In some cases, maybe they signed at 17, had their parents sign for them, came in and served 20 years, and now they're out. So they're in their late 30s, retiring from the Army after 20 years. Now they just go to pot. They gain 25, 30, 40 pounds plus. They develop these health problems. they've got diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and so forth. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, oh my word. So when they went from these vigorous soldiers who are out doing these things, and now in a short time, now they're, old before their time. And I'm thinking, good gravy, what is going on here? And so I saw this over and over and over again. I'm tucking this away in my mind and I'm thinking, this is tragic. And I determined I do not want to be one of these individuals. I want to be somebody who can get down, play with my grandkids, do things with my kids, get on the wrestling mat and coach the kids that I'm coaching until I'm old, till I'm an old man. And so I looked at that and I thought, something's wrong here. Something is wrong here. And so that toll that military life takes, and then that change from military life to civilian life. And as I reflect now on it, I think part of that was the shift to the civilian sector, but the unresolved traumas, perhaps, of military life. I didn't have that perspective yet that these men, largely men, predominantly men, had not dealt with in their life, in their military career, or maybe pre-military career, compounded by their military career. Now, their lives, their health was
Well,
falling apart.
I want to talk about something medically, because this is something that I've never heard it talked about on any other show but my show.
Mm,
Because I'm a big wrestling guy, I'm a big football guy, and I have a traumatic brain injury. I
mm,
know many
mm,
men
mm.
and females who have traumatic brain injuries because you can't be on a tank and shooting a tank for 20 years. Your brain gets rattled. But I never hear them ever talking about CTE in the military. It's never talked about. And I think if we dig deeper, we're going to find out a lot of the people that are committing suicides do have CTE. As a doctor, what is your thoughts on that?
I think, Richard, that you are bringing something to light that needs to be further investigated. And I think what they're seeing is this polytrauma that actually is being recognized, that you have this combination sometimes of physical injuries, psychological injuries, superimposed by this traumatic brain injury. And what you're saying, repeated TBIs giving you CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, for those that don't know what CTE is. So when you talk about traumatic brain injury, what we commonly call concussions, because most people have very mild TBIs. It's not like the person who's in a major uh, motor vehicle accident or some other major collision or problem where they lose consciousness, eh, that we think of traumatic brain injury, or they get a wound to the head or something like this. That's a major traumatic brain injury. 95% of traumatic brain injuries are, well, probably 95% plus are minor, are mild. But if you have repeated ones, especially if the brain doesn't have time to heal,
Yeah.
now you're a major setup for that CTE, that chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So the military is recognizing this polytrauma. You talk about PTS, chronic uh, post-traumatic stress, uh, PTSD, and then you superimpose that on depression, anxiety, maybe addictions, as you are all too familiar with,
Yeah.
maybe physical injuries that come with it, maybe amputations or chronic pain, other ailments that they have to deal with. And now you have all that. Now you have all of this that they're contending with. And certainly we've seen that highlighted amongst some of the football players is where it first came out.
Yep.
As we know, that CTE, highlighted by individuals like Junior Seau.
Junior Seau, yeah.
Yeah, who basically said, all right, I want you to, I'm not going to shoot myself here. I'm going to shoot myself here because I want you to be able to examine my brain.
Yep. Even like professional wrestler Chris Benoit, when they checked his brain after he killed himself and his wife and his kid, he had the brain of an 85-year-old advanced Alzheimer's patient at the age of 40, right, because of constant hitting, constant bruising. And I think it's never talked about. I never hear it mentioned on any other shows except this show, because I think it might be a problem, especially with the suicide rate. That might be one of the issues, because even though we have Kevlars, we know Kevlars ain't worth shit.
Well, I think right. And for blast injuries, a Kevlar is not going to help you.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're sitting in a tank and if you get a blast injury where you're at, or even before you get into the military, I used to get dinged on the wrestling mat and, see stars and, didn't give it much thought at the time. Well, that's a TBI. You get popped and you come up seeing stars. Guess what? That was a mild TBI in football. Bam.
Yeah.
Seeing stars. Guess what? You just had a mild brain injury.
Yeah.
I remember riding a bike and the bike slipping and bam on pavement, smacking my head and laying there dazed. I remember going to airborne school, the same thing. I had a rough landing and bam, I laid there dazed. It broke the rings on my Kevlar. It was the old tin, Kevlar type thing, but it broke the rings on that. I had to go replace that. I landed with such force there and landed there confused and dazed, remember thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get up. The jump master's going to say something's wrong and they're going to recycle me. Oh no, I got to get up. That was my second jump. And it's like, I don't want to get recycled. So, I realized in retrospect, those were TBIs. And so, yes, with that, but in the military, all these blast injuries and, like you say, just being an artilleryman or a tanker, other experiences, fighting with bugle sticks and so forth. It's like, what?
So now I have a question to ask, because you mentioned it earlier. Now, I've had, like I said, over 500 interviews, and I'm not a professional. I'm only a 9th grade dropout. But what I have learned is that in most cases, adults that act out, it's usually because of trauma that happened between the ages of 3 and 13. Then you add war to the mix, and then you add alcohol to the mix sometimes, not every time, but you have the perfect storm. And nobody can tell you how to get out of the perfect storm unless they've been in the perfect storm. So you've been in the perfect storm and you had some experiences where you wrestled with depression. Can you talk about that?
Yes, April 17th, 2014. Seemed like a normal day. I got up after a horrible night's sleep. I was up about 5:45, quickly groomed, had my devotions. My wife had breakfast for me, kissed her, prayed with her. I was out the door, got early to Eisenhower Army Medical Center, as was my case. I'd like to get there early. On the floor before anybody else was, walked down that empty corridor to the Department of Medicine, unlocked my office, flipped on the lights, and everything just came crashing down upon me. And at that point, I just had it. I was beat up, beaten down, and broken. Locked the door behind me, turned off the lights. I drew the blinds, and I crawled up under my desk in a fetal position. And for the next 4 hours, I wrestled with these questions. Skip, what are you doing? Skip, how did you get here? What happened? You're a tough guy. You're a colonel. You've been deployed. You spent over a year and a half in combat zones. You're a national wrestling champion. You've endured a lot of things. What happened? And it was sitting there or laying there, curled up on that musty carpet in that dark office, and trying to put these emotions and feelings in perspective, and reflecting back, all these feelings and scenes colliding, and looking back and seeing, all this trauma and unresolved things that I had dealt with. But the previous 9 months, horrible progressive insomnia, this deepening blue mood, impaired cognition, loss of confidence, indecision, shame, guilt, these negative thoughts that just roll over in my mind. You're a fake. You don't deserve to be a colonel. You let the Army down. You let your department down. You let your family down. Who's going to want to hire you? They would just batter me day and night, these thoughts. Withdrawal. I'd withdrawn from a lot of activities I was normally involved with. I had no interest in wrestling, which was one of my passions. I didn't want to coach the kids. I didn't want to watch wrestling. Just wasn't interested in it. My libido, sex drive, in the toilet. My body from old overuse injuries and osteoarthritis just ached. I just felt horrible.
But now the people
put
that
the pieces together.
But now the people, because I always talk about this, the people that see you from the outside think everything is okay. They don't see that. People don't see the hidden injuries.
I was functional.
Like a lot of people don't realize. I'm sure that even Mrs. Williams, when she kissed her husband, Mr. Robin Williams, that night before bed, and the next morning found him hanging in a closet, they didn't see the individual. They see everybody. He looks okay, so he must be okay. Is that something that you notice? You're looking at everybody else, and everybody's life is just going on, and your life is just going to shit.
Right. Because I had that wrestler mentality. I had that tough guy mentality. Just push on. Just gut it out. Just keep going. Just push. It's that mentality. And that's a double-edged sword. So yeah, it got me through a lot of things in life. But when you're struggling like this, that's dangerous. Because what happens is you just get deeper and deeper and deeper into trouble. And that's what has happened to me. I was sinking deeper and deeper into that deep, dark pit. And I didn't have the insight, even though I'm a physician, I didn't have the insight to being able to step back and say, what is going on here? I knew it felt horrible. I knew the insomnia was getting worse. I was struggling, but I didn't have enough insight to understand and be able to put all these pieces together until that 4 hours that I'm under that desk. And then I finally come to my sense and say, Skip, you're depressed. Go get help. And as I crawl out from under that desk with just a little flicker of hope. And that's when I called the chief of the Department of Behavioral Health after I had tried to go get an appointment at my primary care clinic with a psychologist. They said, well, it'll be about a week. I made the appointment, got back to my office and thought, I'm sitting there thinking, wait, I don't want to wait till next week. picked up the phone and called the chief of behavioral health. Helps when you're a chief of department, you're a colonel, and call the other colonel and say, Joe, this is what's going on with my life. Can you get an appointment for me? That afternoon, I was seeing a clinical psychologist, and she made the formal diagnosis of major depression, and I started getting care.
But I think what you talk about is, you pulled yourself up off of that moldy carpet and said, I need help.
Yes.
I'm struggling. I need help. And I think a lot of us, including me, until my attempted suicide, I figured I got this. I'm strong enough. I dealt with everything else. And then I woke up and I'm like, I ain't got this. And that's when I think if we could just say, I think it takes more strength to say, I need help. Then, because a lot of the veterans or police officers, firefighters think, if we ask for help, that's a weakness, where actually it's a strength.
Absolutely. It takes courage. It takes strength to say, I'm hurting. I need help. And I think there's this sense that I'm a wimp. I'm less than. I'm not a man if I have to admit I need help. No, you're human to admit I need help. And I talk about this in my book, Wrestling Depression is Not for Wimps. And I speak about this, that idea that prevention always trumps rehab. And guess what? I didn't have that insight to monitor the stores, what was going on with me. What's interesting, back in December, so this was April 17th, 2014, in December, right after Christmas, I was recovering from a knee surgery. See, one of the contributors was I had 4 surgeries in 7 months, right before I was retired. Why? Because I was taking care of everybody else, and I delayed taking care of myself. Yeah, that was one of the problems that got me into trouble. But I remember telling my wife, I am utterly exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. But even with that, I didn't have enough insight at that point to step back and say, what's going on here? What's going on? Why is this? And to say, hey, I need to replenish myself. And so if we could learn to monitor those stores, and as they are ebbing, to say, I need to replenish these stores or I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah. And it's been said many times, you cannot pour from an empty cup. But I think a lot of people, high achievers, like ourselves, me, you, we schedule our whole day, but we don't schedule an hour and a half for our own mental health. Whether that's, for me, it's playing video games for an hour a day. Whatever it is, that brings you joy for an hour, we don't schedule that stuff. And then when we get burned out, and then we're like, well, I don't know why I'm burned out. Because you're not enjoying life. You're not being present. So talk about that, even scheduling me time in your daily walk.
Oh, I think that's such a good point, Richard. I have a morning routine that I go through, and I just to piggyback on that, I don't know how many patients I've seen, and in this case, I'm going to talk about young mothers that I see, typically with kids in tow, that I would see in my office, and particularly this last job I was in at what we call a FQHC, Federally Qualified Health Center, taking care of the medically underserved, that would come in and their complaint was, I feel so tired, doc. I am just so tired. And, I take a good history, and already in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I think I know what's going on. I don't think this is something that's organically based. A problem. I don't think it's their thyroid. I don't think it's their heart. I don't think they have diabetes, etc. And I explained this to them up front. I said, I don't think that's what's going on, but we're going to do the appropriate test. I think the problem is your lifestyle, but we're going to do these tests. I'm going to bring you back, and we're going to talk some more. And I can't remember an exception to this. We'd run these tests, I'd bring them back, and then I'd talk with them. And the test would be normal, and we'd talk, and I'd say, all the tests are normal. Here's what I think is going on. And then I'd ask them this question: what do you do to take care of yourself? And almost each one of them would begin to cry. Why? Because they weren't doing anything to take care of themselves. A lot of them didn't even have 15 minutes that they would step away to invest in themselves. And as a result, they just felt horrible, fatigued. And I think it's that way, not just for women, but for men, because we're pushing to accomplish, we're pushing to do, we're pushing to provide, we're pushing to protect, we're looking to do these things. But like I said, prevention always trumps rehab. And if we don't have enough insight to invest in ourselves, we're going to get in trouble. So I have a morning routine. I get up in the morning, I drink my water, I like to go outside, I do a little breath work, and then I do about 15 minutes of exercise. I have my morning devotions. I go through some affirmations, some visualization. I do some reading and some journaling. And then I start my day. And for me, that's part of the way I invest in myself. Talk about wrestling. I love wrestling. So there'll be times on YouTube or for certain wrestling events, I prescribe to a certain wrestling sites, one including what's called Flow Wrestling, and they will stream live wrestling events, like right now the U.S. Open tournament and other events. And so if I don't get to watch it live, I'll watch the archived videos, and so I can select, I want to watch this match and that match and this match, so forth. But I'll do that, or I'll go to a great wrestling tournament, this type of thing. So I can do that because I know that brings me great joy. That helps fill my tank. This morning, I just came back and I met with a brother that I meet with on Friday mornings, a brother from church. We get together, we share, we pray, we encourage one another. So these are things that I do to invest in myself. And I'm learning that I need to do that. And I think that that's important that we do that. Otherwise, we're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Now, one of the friends of the show, his name is Mr. John McCaskill. He's a retired Navy SEAL commander. He wrote a book called Embrace the Suck.
Yeah.
He talked about how the first 15 minutes of your day and the last 15 minutes of your day is going to be how the rest of your day is going to go. And, you know, a lot of people, as soon as they get up, first thing they do is pick up their phone, go on Facebook, watch the news. Something bad happens and say over in one part of the world, now you're in a pissed off mood for the rest of the day. So for me, when I get up in the morning, I give thanks. I say, Lord, thank you for waking me up today. Now everything is gravy from this point. And then, you know, I just meditate for 5-10 minutes on gratitude. And I don't pick up my phone for maybe 15, 30 minutes. And I found out, you know, since I don't do that or watch TV before I go to bed at night, I read before I go to bed. I find that I don't have those negative feelings, and I'm not thinking about negative stuff all day. Even if it's just for those 15-minute increments, it really changes the other 23 hours and 30 minutes of my day.
Excellent point, Rich. Yes, absolutely. That electronic device either can be a blessing or it can be a curse, depending on how we use it. But your point is well taken. What we give our attention to and our intention to in the morning and at night makes such a difference. And in our mindset and how we live our lives. And so I think that's important. So you're giving your attention to other things there, to thanks and meditating on gratitude, praying. So you're giving your attention and intention to that. And then again, attention to reading and intention. Okay, I'm going to calm my mind. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be doing this or doing this up on a screen. And that does some other things. It helps calm your nervous system. You're not getting exposed to all that blue light impairing your melatonin before you go to bed. And so it serves other benefits too.
And I love, I'm a big mindset guy. I'm a big history buff. I love to read. I've read over 6,000 books. And
wow, 6,000.
And I loved your book. I've read your book twice, so I love your book. But everybody talks about Napoleon Hill, but I wanted to know who taught Napoleon Hill. So I went way back. I went, talking about his mentor, and his mentor would always say, talk about the reticular activating system in the brain. How once you start looking for positives in life, your brain is automatically going to start looking for the positives. But also in the same breath, if you're looking for the negatives are going to show up.
Yep.
Like I was taught by somebody. He said, I said, this was when I first started changing my life. I said, I don't know how to change. He says, well, what do you do all day? I said, I look at Facebook all day. He's like, I want you to start hearting and liking everything positive and let everything negative go by. He says, within 30 days, that algorithm is going to change, just like your mind can change. If you start looking for the good stuff stuff will show up. So talk about that a little bit.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So giving thanks. Gratitude has so many benefits. You see, gratitude actually rewires our brain. And it does that even at a molecular level. And a woman that talks about this in an amazing way in terms of that rewiring of the brain at the molecular level is Dr. Carolyn Leaf. She has her own podcast, has a book regarding that, teaches about this. Amazing woman, dedicated Christian woman, but phenomenal neuropsychologist. This idea of gratitude, because what gratitude can do, gratitude improves our immunity, lowers our blood pressure, decreases our risk of heart disease. It changes our whole outlook on life. It can boost our endorphins, lower our pain threshold. It improves our strength and endurance. It improves our healing capacity from an illness or disease. Incredible capacity when we have an attitude of gratitude. And so you talked about the RAS, the reticular activating system. And that's the part of the brain that is looking for things, that gives our attention to things. What are we thinking about? What are we looking for? So the analogy would be you buy a new car. Let's say it's this beautiful Mercedes or whatever it might be. Now, guess what? You're going to start seeing all that car, maybe even that model on the street. They were always there. But the fact that you bought one, now you're going to start seeing them all over. Why? Because your RAS is tuned into that. You just talked about that example in your life. So I would challenge people that same thing. Try this for 30 days. So write out 3 things. Get just a cheap notebook. It could be something like this. I buy these by 8, 10 at a time. Simple. I go to the dollar store. It cost me $1. 3 things you're thankful for and why you're thankful for them. Just day by day. It can change your life. And you do that. You could do that at nighttime, or you could do that in the morning. But it will start rewiring your brain. And as you start doing that, it's going to change the way you start looking for things, because you're going to look for more things and more things. It's just the way it works. And similarly, like you said, If you don't pick up that phone at first thing in the morning, it changes the whole way your day is going to proceed.
Yep. And like Mr. Dale Carnegie said, because I read his autobiography, which is like that thick. The thing I got out of the whole book was your obsessions become your possessions. Whether, if you think I'm going to have good health, if you think you're going to be happy, you will be, because that's what you're focusing on. And, somebody once told me that gratitude and anger cannot be in the same space. So if you have an attitude of gratitude, you can't be angry, because they just can't be in the same space. Just like darkness and light is either one or the other.
Sure.
So now talk to us the last couple of minutes. Tell us about what you're doing, what you got going on, and how we can support your mission.
Oh, thank you, Rich. I so appreciate that, brother. I am in the process of building a business and putting together things related to helping men, particularly tough guys who struggle with depression. I'm putting together what I call a kingdom-based approach to helping these tough guys. I'm getting ready to launch a beta course, and I'll be looking for men to join me as I launch that in the next 4 to 6 weeks to help men struggling with this dark disease. People can best contact me at my website, www.transformtoughguys.com. Again, www.transformtoughguys.com. I'm very excited about this new venture. I look to speak. I look to share. As you mentioned, I write. It's my passion. Why? Because I've been there. And I don't want to see others that have to get to the point where I was at.
And talk to us. How do we find your TED Talk, and what is the?
Oh, thank you. My TED Talk is called "Tough Guys Are an Endangered Species." You can look it up under Skip Mondragon, my name, TEDx Talk, and there you'll find it on YouTube. Very easy. Skip Mondragon, TEDx.
And it's one of my favorite TEDx's, probably one of my top 3 TEDx
Oh,
talks.
bless you, brother. I so appreciate that, because it's a message that men need to hear, particularly tough guys need to hear, or those who love tough guys. They need to hear this message because it's so relevant to the struggles that tough guys have.
Well, sometimes talking about tough guys, I'm from Jersey, and my my whole family is Italian, so, and they're different. They're tough guys in a different way.
Yes.
But I think a tough guy, in my opinion, is a guy that can protect their family, but also when your 2-year-old tells you to pick up the plastic phone and talk, that's what a tough guy is.
Amen.
That's what a tough guy does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think, like, I know that the toxic masculinity, and I totally get it. For me, I know that, with my 23 years in the military, I can go back to being that dog. If I have to kick somebody's ass, but I don't want to.
No.
Like they say, if you own a Ferrari, you don't have to do 200 miles an hour. You can go 55, because everybody knows you could do 200 miles an hour. And I think a lot of guys that you think act tough are just really not tough at all. It's just bravado, because they're, deep inside, they got a lot of unresolved issues.
Sure. Yeah. Bullies like to act tough. I learned that. They put on a good show until you call their bluff.
Yeah, I love it. So, guys, if you've been watching this, I'm so grateful and thankful for you guys. Guys, if you've struggled with anything that we've talked about today, please leave a comment and tell us how you've gotten through them, and maybe somebody else is watching. Maybe they can learn a little bit from you guys. So just leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe and share this. Definitely check out his book. Definitely check out his TED Talks, because I sat there in amazement, and then I just had to hit the button again then one more time after that. So like I said, I listened to it 3 times, and I think it's truly amazing, and it's totally heartfelt. So, Doc, I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for all you're doing, especially for our fellow brothers in the military and our first responders. I thank you, brother.
I love you guys, and remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.